DC's Superman Action Comics 1031 hit store shelves and spinner racks in October of 2021, the same month that Starboy by the Weeknd was a big hit, and the 2021 World Series of Baseball began with the Atlanta Braves taking on the Houston Astros. This episode dives right into the action from the preceding issue, where it appears that ships from WarWorld were set to invade. However, they are actually chasing a much smaller ship heading directly to Earth. Superman and Superboy fly in to investigate and save the smaller vessel. Superman is intrigued when he hears a Kryptonian prayer from one of the passengers. As this issue starts, Superman breaks into the Warzone spaceship and tries to reassure the frightened Kryptonian refugees, speaking to them in their ancient language to show he means no harm. But the other ships keep attacking, and he asks Superboy to help fend them off and find a safe landing spot. The ship takes too much damage, forcing Superman and Superboy to rescue the refugees as the ship crashes into the ocean. After the remaining Warzone ships retreat, Superman leaves their prisoners with the Atlanteans and brings the refugees to the Fortress of Solitude for care. Kellogg's finds the refugees have endured years of neglect, showing signs of malnutrition and poorly healed injuries. One girl among them speaks an ancient Kryptonian prayer, which surprises Supergirl. Unsure of the refugees' origins, Superman goes to Atlantis, where he learns from Atlantean scientists that the Warzone ship is a patchwork of technologies. They discover a strange stone powering the ship, which resembles Source, but the Atlanteans refuse to release it. Meanwhile, the refugee girl, recalling her escape from WarWorld and her brand of the House of El, awakens in the fortress, unsure of her purpose on Earth, but aware that her next choice could determine the fate of her people. The story continues in issue 1032. This issue was written by Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Johnson broke into the comics industries with Boom Studios' Last Sons of America and Warlords of Appalachia. Johnson has had his work published in most of the modern comic studios, including Marvel, Boom, Dynamite, Aftershock, and Scout Comics. His run on Action Comics lasted from 1039 to 1060. He also worked on 2021, 22, and 23 Action Comics Annual. This month, along with Nick Klein, we'll celebrate 800 issues of Hulk in Incredible Hulk. Be sure to check that out. Daniel Sampere pulled double duty and was penciler and inker on this issue. Sampere is a comic book artist out of Barcelona, Spain. His work with DC includes runs on Batgirl, Injustice, Dark Crisis, and several others. In a recent AMA on Reddit, Sampere said of his work on Superman, "Working with Superman is the biggest highlight. It's one of my favorite characters and it's so cool to draw him. I also love the story that Phillip Kennedy Johnson was creating. I think it's a great run, and I wish I could have stayed for longer." Sampere is currently working on Wonder Woman. Adriano Lucas is a powerhouse comic book colorist whose work spans an impressive range of titles for both Marvel and DC. At Marvel, he's known for his contributions to Marvel Adventures, The Avengers, and Realm of Kings, Inhumans, where his colors brought depth and vibrancy to each page. At DC, Lucas has colored fan-favorite titles like Detective Comics, Green Lantern War Journal, Nightwing, and Suicide Squad, Dream Team, as well as iconic characters like Hawkgirl, Titans, and Birds of Prey. He's also taken on cover artist duties, enhancing series like Outsiders with his signature style, blending intense color with a cinematic touch. Letterer Dave Sharp is best known for his work at Marvel Comics. After years of working for Marvel, he moved to DC in 2010 to work on the title Bruce Wayne, The Road Home, and later worked on a few other small projects. Recently, he's been working on several DC comic titles including Green Lantern, Sinestro, and Red Lanterns. Mikhail Hanin was a cover artist on this issue. Trained as an architect, he left that profession to pursue work in comics in 2010 and has been steadily working at DC since 2011. Mikhail has worked as a penciler, inker, and cover artist for titles including Trinity War, Batman Eternal, Grayson, and Justice League Dark. Jamie S. Rich and Diego Lopez edited this issue. Rich, who was executive editor at IDW, has had his published works in IDW, Oni Press, and Dark Horse. His first editing gig was at Dark Horse in 1994, before moving on to Oni Press in 1998. After Oni, Rich started working at DC's Vertigo imprint. In 2018, he became group editor for the Batman and Justice League titles, and eventually the Superman titles. Rich left DC in 2021 to become editor-in-chief at Tapas Media, a short-format web comics publisher. Diego Lopez has made a significant impact as a comic book editor, lending his expertise to some of DC's biggest titles. His work on Action Comics Volume 1, issues 1029 through 1036 showcases his commitment to the legacy of Superman, while his contributions to Aquaman Volume 8 and Justice League Volume 3 displays his knack for elevating superhero narratives. Lopez's diverse portfolio also includes fan favorites like The Flash, Red Hood and the Outlaws, and Deathstroke. Additionally, his work on YA titles like DC Superhero Girls and Harley Quinn Breaking Glass highlights his versatility in reaching all types of readers. Executive editor Marie Javins is known for a long association with Marvel Comics. As of 2020, Javins is editor-in-chief of DC Comics. Javins attended Antioch College and interned at Marvel Comics and Epic Comics. After graduation, she was hired as an editorial assistant and secretary for Mark Gruenwald. After a shakeup at Warner Media in August 2020, she became a co-editor-in-chief with Michelle R. Wells for DC Comics. In November 2020, Javins was named sole editor-in-chief of DC Comics. Speaking exclusively to Read the Freaking Comics, editor Jamie S. Rich says, "The interesting thing about Action Comics at the time was that it was a culmination of a lot of planning. The WarWorld story was born out of discussions of the fabled 5G reboot of the DC Universe, a plan to reset the timeline without destroying continuity in the wake of death metal. It was going to set the stage for a new, younger versions of the main characters while setting up the original versions as older versions of themselves. When Dan Didio got let go, 5G largely went with him. The Future State event was designed as a miniature version of the initiative, though a lot of what ended up there was new and not a carryover. I had been invested in the 5G plans, so wanted to carry on with the stories. This is where Yara Flor came from, and it was where we had hatched the idea to have John Kent to be the Superman of Earth and Clark to become the Superman of the known universe, and to have him reform the Authority. The notion being that we would separate father and son for a year and have a meaningful reunion when Clark comes back. Phillip Kennedy Johnson was brought in to take over as writer, and he added pretty much everything you see in this issue to the skeleton of a story we had concocted in the editorial office. He added the concept of the refugee Kryptonians to give more weight to the fight with Mongul to face off against the people of WarWorld that Superman would eventually become champion to. All this stuff with the way they wore chains, how that signified their status as slaves, that was all Phillip, including the chains Superman would wear in what was affectionately referred to as Zaddy Superman, the shirtless Clark in the gladiatorial arena designed by Mikhail Hanin in Future State. This issue features our first look at Thora, though she is not yet named. Thora is a descendant of a lost colony of Kryptonians known as Philosians. She and her people were enslaved by Mongul, who forced her to be a pawn in his plan to destroy Superman, but she found the courage to defy him and became an ally of the Superman family. This issue is also the first appearance of the Genesis fragment, though at the time its true nature is unknown. Genesis is the crystallized blood of Ulgran, the first and mightiest of the old gods. It is a potent energy source, but also has dangerous mutagenic properties. Genesis can be used as an alternative to yellow sunlight to fuel and even enhance the powers of Kryptonians and Philosians, but their cells can only safely absorb the Genesis energy if the mutative radiation is filtered out. The ancient Kryptonian language of Valkyrie is first named in this issue. This is the initial language that the Philosians speak when they arrive on Earth. It was a prayer muttered by one of the Philosians that alerts Clark to the possible presence of Kryptonians on board the doomed ship. Just how deep is Atlantis? Atlantis is located in the North Atlantic Ocean in DC Comics. The average depth of the Atlantic is 3,338 meters, or 10,932 feet. Since the crushing depth of a human is only 60 meters, or 197 feet, you'd be long dead before arriving if you tried to visit without protection. So can Superman breathe underwater? While some comics, TV animation, and movies showcase his deep water skills, no. He can't breathe underwater, but he can hold his breath for a really long time. In some versions, a single breath could supply enough oxygen to hold him over for weeks. Phillip Kennedy Johnson delivers a strong story of action and intrigue in this issue. With the bulk of the build-up occurring in previous issues, this one starts with a bang as Superman and Superboy are in the thick of the action from the first page. Actually, Mikhail Hanin's excellent cover of this issue gives us a taste of the excitement even before you crack it open. Once the story settles down, our heroes are left with more questions than answers, and so are we as readers. Daniel Sampere's art is striking, bold, and exciting. I particularly like the use of a full-page splash/crash down of the alien ship into the ocean, really capturing both the gravity and awesomeness of the moment. Adriano Lucas' colors are rich and bright, as any Superman comic should be. Can you tell I'm a sucker for a good Superman story? Being a relatively new comic, you can find issues online for a low cost. I found an issue on eBay for $6 and a variant cover edition on Amazon for $11. 2021 saw a large increase of graphic novel sales with a jump of 60% compared to 2020. Total comics and graphic novel sales to consumers in the US and Canada were approximately $2.075 billion, up 70% from the sales in 2019, the last pre-pandemic year. Looking into October specifically, the top 5 comics sold were Marvel's Amazing Spider-Man and Dark Ages, Image Comics' Gunslinger, and Boom Studios' House of Slaughter. DC's Batman 114 with the Future State storyline was in 3rd place. In terms of revenue, Marvel won out the month with strong sales for Amazing Spider-Man and Immortal Hulk. Image with Gunslinger, and DC once again with Batman 114. 3 of the top 5 selling DC titles that month were Batman 114 and 115, and Batman the Long Halloween Special one-shot. The other two being Joker number 8 and Wonder Woman's 80th Anniversary Special. In 2021, DC Comics was in a state of flux. When Dan Didio was let go, the final chapter of DC Rebirth and Death Metal went with him. The year began with the 2-month Future State timeline, before segueing into a wide variety of series relaunches. By March of 2021, DC relaunched their entire line again under the banner of Infinite Frontier. The DC multiverse was expanded into a larger omniverse where everything is canon, effectively reversing the changes the New 52 introduced a decade prior. DC also launched DC Horror, founded by editor Kate Kubert. The imprint releases limited comic series and one-shots in the horror genre. The ads in this issue are varied, but at the same time they are not. Only 2 advertisers ran ads in this issue, the CW network and DC itself. CW promoted its new Batwoman series, with Javicia Leslie taking over from the departing Ruby Rose, the excellent Superman and Lois, plus Black Lightning on the back cover. DC was heavily promoting other lines and graphic novels with no less than 8 promos throughout the issue. Man, what I wouldn't do to get some Atlas bodybuilding ads thrown in there for good measure. This week's comic store shoutout was chosen simply because we have a scene at Atlantis in this issue. So I chose Atlantis Comics, located at 9649 First View Street in Norfolk, Virginia. Or you can find them at atlantiscomics.com. Thanks for checking out this video. If you want to see more, please hit like and subscribe. If you have suggestions for comics you want me to deep dive into, please leave a comment below. Please help and support real artists. AI